Yeah, it has just gone 6. I think we can start. So good evening, everyone. My name is Leduma Poshudi. I have the privilege of welcoming you to this special evening in celebration of St. Augustine's feast day. Happy feast, everyone. Your presence here tonight is a testament to the enduring relevance of St. Augustine's College and its commitment to academic excellence and the transformation of society. This is a special evening indeed, for we have received a warm message from Sister Edith Reid, the founder of St. Augustine's College. Sister Edith extends her warm feast day greetings and blessings to each of you this evening. She sends her words of encouragement, assuring us that she continues to hold the college in her prayers. May her blessings and prayers inspire us as we embark on this journey together this evening. Tonight, we gather not only to honor the life and legacy of St. Augustine, but also to introduce and explore the exciting research program here at St. Augustine's College. But before we hear about this exciting program, please indulge me as I present a short poem as part of presence, followed by a short prayer. Kirsty, if you could present, thank you. This poem is a reflection of my personal search for meaning of home and identity. The poem is entitled Maputswe. It is an industrial town along the Caldon River, just outside Vicksburg. In some way, this poem shows how education plays a role in shaping our lives and worldviews. Maputswe. In Maputswe's embrace, a journey began where educational seeds were sown hand in hand. From mountains high with ascents deep, I ventured forth where English words would grip. Feeling different, excluded, in that complex of peers, my rural voice met puzzled looks, fueling my fears. But amidst the biases and othering strife, I found strength in my heritage, embracing my life. Teachers held power, impacting my core. Positive influences shaped values forevermore. Yet the stick's sting, a punishment unkind, diminished my spirit, leaving scars behind. Through it all, I grew. My values took root, inclusive, diverse, a foundation to reboot. Career choices bloomed, aspirations took flight. Education's winds guided me with hope so bright. In relationships, I found connection and grace, nurtured by education's embrace. From classroom to conversations, I learned to relate with empathy and openness, sealing life's fate. Maputswe, a place of memories grand, where education's impact continues to expand. From personal values to careers embrace, and relationships nurtured with love and grace. Let us pray. Divine and eternal presence, as we gather this evening to celebrate the life and teaching of St. Augustine, we are reminded of his profound words. Our souls are restless until they rest in you. As we seek to deepen our understanding of home and homemaking, may we always remember that our true home is in your eternal presence. Guide our thoughts, our discussions, and our hearts tonight, that we may draw closer to you in all we do. We also pray in a special way for Father Martin, the head of theology at St Augustine's. May his operation be successful and may his recovery be swift and complete. And family, it is with heavy hearts that we remember and pray for Anastasia de Vries, a dedicated and PhD student at St. Augustine's who passed away yesterday. May her soul be welcomed into the eternal embrace and find rest in the divine presence. We ask all this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentations. Please, due to Poppy Act, I implore everyone to please be careful to avoid names of individuals or any information that could be directly or indirectly linked to an individual or particular group of people. And please keep your cameras off and your mic off unless you are speaking. I appeal to the speakers and everyone to be aware of the use of time. And speakers, you'll know your time is up when my camera switches on. Our first speaker for this evening is Professor Gruger, a distinguished academic whose work has significantly contributed to the fields of philosophy and peace studies. Professor Gruger will present the rationale behind St. Augustine's research program. Following Professor Gruger, we are privileged to hear from Professor Sacco, the college president. Together with Professor Gruger, they will engage in a dialogue centered on domicide, homecoming, and homemaking, central ideas to St. Augustine's research program. Professor Gruger, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Leduma. It is wonderful to be here with everyone. Very much under the impression of your beautiful poem, and maybe we can also refer to that later on as we go along. Now, so I just want to share briefly with you a few thoughts on the rationale for our research program. When you speak of a rationale, you're basically speaking of the reason, right? Why did we choose this specific research area and to have a research program? Well, firstly, I think it flows, the rationale flows from our St. Augustine vision and mission. So St. Augustine's vision, as it's currently formulated, is embracing dialogue for the common good. And in our pursuit of this vision, we have a number of missions steps. You know, we have, the first one is that rigorous philosophical, theological, and ethical inquiry. Values-based teaching and learning is the second one. The third one is challenging applied research. And then the fourth one, serving our broader community. And I think it's specifically that third and fourth one that speaks to, you know, why do we want to have a research? We must have a research program at St. Augustine College, because that's the way we are pursuing our vision. And it's, of course, in line with what universities do. Universities do teaching and learning. They engage with their communities, and they do research as well in service of the community. So that's why we do research. But why a research program? I mean, in the past, academics would just engage in their own research, and you know, it would be perhaps a bit more ad hoc and you know, haphazard even in some senses. But when you have a research program, you get um, you get momentum going, you get synergy going. And in that way, I think when a number of people research work together, of course, you can go deeper, you can investigate various aspects of a reality, and really become a center of excellence along those lines. And then, and this is, of course, in that sense, we're not strange. This is the way that research often happens in universities in this country and all over the world. You become a center of excellence, then you can apply for research funding. Through the funding process, if the funding is granted, then you can have postdoctoral people joining the team. In that sense, once publications can go up, and you can really make a contribution. So that's basically, I think the formal reason why we wanted to do a research program, and not only encourage our faculty members and students just to do research. Of course, the students must do research as part of their postgraduate studies as well. But when those postgraduate students are really part of a research program, again, there's the synergy, and I think they get the sense that they're part of a bigger something than they are. Now, speaking to the actual content of our research program and our research topic, again, I think that flows from our strategic goals, and the strategic goals, strategic positioning has to do with our vision and mission as well. But since the end of COVID, and since St Augustine College moved our premises from Victory Park to Woodmead, we've done some serious soul searching, serious strategic planning, and sat down, where is it that we are called really to make a difference in the South African society, Southern African, continental context, and global context? Where are we called to make a contribution? And in our, the point is, maybe I should just say that for us at the moment, it's not viable just to be a general faculty of humanities, a general faculty of theology. We're simply too small, and there are others. Of course, we come from the Catholic ethos and Catholic intellectual tradition, but there are other universities that have much more general ways to do. So we have to position ourselves in the South African context and wider. We have been guided in these deliberations by the papal encyclical Laudato Si, which appeared in 2015. And of course, the follow-up Laudate Deum, which appeared in 2023. And the subtitle is for us very important of Laudato Si, on the care for our common home. Of course, this speaks to the ecological approach, a new ecological worldview that's really a kind of a rediscovery of a Christian message. But the notion of home is very, very important. So we took that to heart. And the other big motivation is, of course, the realization of the fractured state of the South African society, conflicted state, but not only our society. I think the world is conflicted and fractured at the moment. So St Augustine College has proven expertise in the fields of peace and conflict studies. We have a long-standing program in peace studies, pride ethics, and social and political ethics, all of that. And in our strategic deliberations, we thought we should combine this. Coming from the idea of home, we must connect this to understanding the root causes of conflict, and perhaps how to address this in the idea of homecoming and homemaking. So bringing those two together now, the content of our research topic, our research area of our research program is to understand the experience of homelessness, and the experience of home and homecoming, and use those experiences and the research regarding those experiences to contribute to peace building and understanding the sources of conflict. That's basically our research program, and we have high ideals of making this an international research program. We have been in contact with the International Federation of Catholic Universities, IFCU, and they've in a way already agreed that there will be a kind of a relaunch of a certain research program, and our research program will make a sub program of that. So whereas we are still in the beginning phases of that rollout of the international research program, we've already started at postgraduate level to encourage all our postgraduate students from the honors to the master's level, and hopefully also going forward to the doctoral level, to start joining into this research program. The idea of home, the experience of home, but its reverse is equally important, the experience of homelessness and of being displaced, and how that connects to trauma, to conflict, and again, conversely, how that then feeds into possibilities for making peace, for coming home to peace, so to speak. So that very briefly is the rationale for our research program, and I'm now excited to discuss the nuts and bolts, so to speak, and the meaning of this with Professor Teresa Sacco, Prof. Terry, our president and my beloved colleague, dear colleague. So, and I think she can kick off, just to explain to the participants and everyone here, what is it, uh, what are the various angles of this research area that we want to train our students in, and try to become a center of excellence in terms of a university. Thanks, Prof. Terry.
Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here, and to my colleagues and students and community, I want to say a very big thank you to Professor Yaku, because he has helped shape the focus of our work in this area. When he first started teaching with me last year in the Peace Studies program, he helped us shape the whole notion of home and homecoming. But the way he did it was to first put on the table the notion of domicide. And we all in the class felt very moved last year about that. And so I would like to start our conversation, Prof. Yaku, on that notion of domicide. It felt so resonant to all of us in the space. It felt so resonant to all of us who live in a country that has come from colonialization, has come from apartheid, has come from the devastation of not being at home in oneself and in the community, and actually living in a state of otherness. And it was reverberating through all our experiences. So thank you, Yaku, and I'd like you to outline what have you learned around the notion of domicide? What is it, and how can we think more deeply about it?
Yes, thank you very much. So this is the word literally means the killing of home, right? It's the name of a book by two sociologists, social scientists, Porteous and Smith. The book appeared in 2001, and it was actually Prof. Terry who sent me an article that appeared in The Guardian, the British daily. And in that article in The Guardian, the book by Porteous and Smith was referenced, and I went down this rabbit hole and, of course, searched for the book and started reading it, and just the word resonated with us very much. But literally, the word domicide means the killing of home, and of course, it speaks to physical destruction of people's homes. We live in an era of displacement. Africa is the continent with the largest percentage of internally and cross-borderly displaced people in the world, due to war, due to economic reasons. Of course, yeah, I think the point of those, yeah, power differentials between the global north and the global south that really forces people to become migrants are there as well at the background. So there's physical domicide that happens. Colonization is definitely a form of domicide where um, people were literally, well, in that horrible social experiment where 14 million people were shipped across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, and really to work there on the plantations and as slaves. That is as such. And then, of course, people were displaced in order to make home for other people, for colonizers that came in. So there is that physical element of domicide. In South Africa, we have the added element of apartheid, which I suppose built onto colonization, but is also its own kind of ideology that placed in there, but really displaced people. We have the various acts that were passed, to the Group Areas Acts, to forcibly remove people from where they grew up and where they lived to other areas, and they were just plonked down there. And then you have the forced, basically not forced, but you have the migratory labor system where people, for instance, live in the rural areas or in these apartheid homelands that were artificially created, and then they had to travel and live in another place to work on the mines or wherever. And we still have the vestiges of that and the remnants of that in South Africa, and I suppose wider. It's still with us. So those physical aspects of destruction of home, of domicile. But of course, it's much more than that. It's psychological and symbolical, because what happens is when you home is not only a physical structure. Home is an experience of being in the world and a way of relating to your world from a specific place of perhaps safety, of a preferential place for where you sort of act with the world. And through the destruction of home, that the whole meaning of one's life somehow becomes imperiled. So domicile is also symbolic. People do not feel at home at the moment. There's just perhaps the whole post-colonial experience still. You know, whose world are we living in? So for us in South Africa to really tell a story of that this is our home, and what does that mean? We're not living in someone else's home according to some other rule. So there's the symbolic element, but then the psychological element of the various forms of trauma and loss of meaning as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I
So let
wondered
me
if
stop there.
can we just talk, I would like to come in there because
Sure.
the work that we did in the post-apartheid movement was around challenging the domicile of people in this country, and it's deep and it's pervasive, that we have families who were living together and families who made lives together in the rural areas. And because of the hut tax, that they forced to go and work on the farms and the work in the mines. And that was the beginning of the unraveling in this country, for the indigenous people of this country, the unraveling of the loss of self, the loss of identity, the loss of family, the loss of belonging. And people were created, townships were created around the cities where hostels were, where men lived and then took second wives in the city. It has remained a very, very deep source of trauma. And also so it's for me, what's really important is to look at the experience of self, the experience of relationality, the experience of feeling whole, the experience of the humiliation of losing your dignity and value. And after 30 years in this country, we're still seeing it and experiencing it because there's an intergenerational trauma that is related to both the colonizing experience and the apartheid experience. And if we look at many of our leadership, that still is embodied there, experienced in there, that trauma, the collective trauma of the apartheid system has destroyed the spirituality of white people and the very core of African people in this state. So while we have gone through the TRC, while we've gone through the reconciliation process, we still need to work for healing. The recovery from violence is profound. The experience of domicide of self is extensive. The experience of spiritual undoing is very difficult to keep oneself together. So I really think the notion of domicide is extremely moving for us and for those of us that work in this project. And I was just wondering if, Yaku, you would like to speak more about maybe some of the reasons why we've chosen a phenomenological approach to this research, that it is intimately in relating to our students' experiences of themselves and of their families and of generations, that it's really important that what students bring is something that is deeply moving for them and deeply healing for them from the space of being the phenomenological choice that we have as our method.
Yes, absolutely. And the notion of home is so rich and multifaceted. And let's say, let me just say in parentheses, we are aware that many people also have very negative experiences of home, whereas others, of course, have much more positive experiences of home. So it's a mixed thing. You can start thinking of home at a philosophical level. You can speak of ontological homelessness, of modernity really extracting the human from the rest of nature, and in that sense becoming really, we're all ontologically homeless, and capitalism is perhaps or certain forms of capitalism is an expression of this ontological homelessness. But that's at the background. I think what you're saying, Terry, is the fact of people's lived experiences, and that is again where home is an experiential structure. And if one investigates it, do your research into people's lived experiences of domicide and of homeless, of homecoming and of homemaking, and I think we will speak of that just now, then it's really very close. And I think that is perhaps through that narrating those traumas and the experience of those traumas that the research can contribute to the healing process, and wants to contribute to. So it doesn't want to be airy-fairy, high up in the sky, only abstract, but really with people's lived experiences. A project, I suppose, that was done in various aspects. For instance, in the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that worked for a couple of years after 1994 here in South Africa. But I think we have a sense that really listening to people's stories of domicide is again necessary in this point in time in South Africa's history, and perhaps broader in the world than we want to admit. Terry?
Yes. I think that's really an important one. And talking to the academics, is that we're living as the second cousins of the academy. that actually is speaking to a cognitive empire of the global north, where people experience being cut off from the neck down, and the only thing that's important in the academy is how we think and what we think and what we analyze and what we conclude. Whereas this notion of domicile of our people and the way we are learning and teaching and educating ourselves together as a St. Augustine community of very well-informed people, that we actually feel that we are healing all those wounds that come with it. We're not cut off from the very nature of the research that we're doing. So we experience we actually experience the thoughts, the perceptions, the woundedness. We feel the hurt, and the students do that as well. That there are areas that we can say, okay, these are our experiences, but we're going to bracket those and we're going to learn from them. And that learning from those experiences is then fed into the way we conceive of the research, the way we engage with the research, the way we reflect on the research, so that it's very excellent research, but it's informed by a whole person approach. It's informed by an epistemology, a way of knowing that is much more sensitive to the context of people and to the centuries of hurt, the centuries of silence, the centuries of not being valued and of dehumanized and undignified in the academic space. So we really want to bring those experiences to the fore and say that this is an epistemology that is valuable, that it's not only what we think, but it's also what gives our lives meaning. What have we learned from that suffering? How can we contribute our thinking to the society so that our society can understand more deeply what it means to study and to understand, but while we put our whole being in that space, so that can increase our knowledge and our understanding and our activism and engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way that you framed it now. That the methodology or the conceptual framework must really also contribute and express in a way a kind of a decolonizing attitude, that we are at home, I suppose, in the global south from where we speak. But I just want to add that I think it's also versatile enough to that not only be social scientific, theology, which is an important part of our college, can really find itself there. Of course, the notion of home is such a pregnant theological notion as well. And I'm just reminded of that book by Miroslav Volf, The Home of God, that only recently appeared. And so I think we really want to encourage all the theologians in the college to engage with this topic from their theological perspective, but also it's possible to incorporate our education students, of course, and the philosophers as well. So I think we are confident that the various disciplines can perhaps from various sides engage in this research program. But perhaps we should speak a little bit now about the flip side of the domicide, which is the homecoming and the homemaking side, which is the other part of our conceptual framework, Thierry.
Yeah, so I actually think that it's interesting that you've said that, Jaco, because when we look at domicide and we look at the interdisciplinary approach to conflict, there's the real parent in the discourse globally is Johann Galtung, and he speaks about understanding what is the roots of how do we conceptualize violence, and he talks about structural violence and we've spoken about that earlier with the domicile of home, that the structural violence is the society that creates laws and creates policies and creates ideological apparatuses that oppress people. So that's the structural violence is looking at the way the society is violent towards people. Then the other one is the cultural violence, and this would be the patriarchy, the ideology of racism, and that is perpetuated in societies and in families, and needs challenging. And then there's the direct violence. So if you have that typology of structural violence, cultural violence, which is ideological, and then the direct violence, we start looking at the experience of building peace. And what the approach that we've taken at St Augustine is that the students start with understanding peace as personal peace. What does that mean? How do we understand personal peace? What is our spirituality? What is the search for meaning? How do we relate? What are the values that we have? What are can we live simple lives? What is important to us? What drives us? That the spirituality of ourselves is at the center of understanding what peace is. So that's where we start. We start with
Yes.
the internal peace.
Yes. So, in a way, a homecoming to self, being at home with oneself, while being on a spiritual journey. There's the paradox, isn't it? Being at home with oneself without being too comfortable, but always trying to journey towards home even more. But then from that inner reality somehow to also engage in the society in ever broadening kind of concentric circles towards uh, the community, the country, the state, the whole of nature in a way, or of creation, so to speak, to come home in all of those aspects. And I was just I wanted to bring in the point here of the moral imagination. That was the other scholar that's influencing us is Jean-Paul Lederach, and he speaks of the role of the moral imagination. And I think the role of the imagination, and specifically the narrative imagination of being able to tell stories, being able to envision the potential for a different way of living, is such an important point, and it has to do with human freedom and I suppose the vocation of humans. But the thing is, to tell a story about yourself, a different story. We live in South Africa. There are common narratives or dominant narratives about how bad things are, and things are always going down. Is it possible to tell the story of us in another way, and how does that then actually contribute, I suppose, towards peace and homecoming? So for us, through the moral imagination, homecoming and homemaking is a narrative thing. And I think when we do our research, it will be easier for our social science researchers, for instance, to basically ask of their participants, what are the kinds of stories that you tell in order to feel at home in this place, or how do you reconcile? What stories do you tell in order to reconcile with, or to try and get away from the trauma or reconcile the trauma?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Yaku, that you're saying there's no ways for us in the SADC region and in Africa to say that we've become whole and therefore we can build peace. That we understand our vulnerability. We all vulnerable. We are all impacted by the violence of our society. And so therefore, for me, the humiliation that many of our people live with is a destruction of the internal self. And as we share together the stories, as we connect with each other deeply, we contribute to each other's experience of being at home. Because I think that for me, the white privilege is alienating to so many of our people, because it is so sewn up. It's so okay with itself. It's self-satisfied, you know.
Yes.
And I think that Julia Butler's theory on queer theory is something that's really important for us to grapple with, because it's actually queering the understanding of things. So if we
Yes.
look at the decolonizing of our understanding of what the cognitive empire is that we've experienced from the global north, we're queering that from a global south perspective. And it's important because it's very alienating for us to experience the ideas and the academy as othering those of us that are in the
Yeah.
African continent. So yeah, that was an important
And
point.
I think it's very interesting relation between being at home in a positive sense, or coming home, and then to be too much at home, and to be too at home. So part of the research would also be to disrupt in a way, to make unheimlich, to make uncanny, uh, feeling, not at home, in order to perhaps have a deeper kind of sense of homecoming, to a broader, more spacious kind of home, eventually the whole of creation as our common home. Yeah.
Yes, so it's about peace. Sorry, I see Laduma. We've got to wrap up, and thank you for coming back online. That we do not see peace as something that we're going to arrive at, and it's going to be it's all will be well. It is a horizon that we live in hope to move towards together.
Absolutely. Now, thank you very much. I'm excited about this, and I hope the students and the participants now have a bit of an idea. So, yeah, let's have some questions at the end. Right. Over to you again, Leduma.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Sako and Professor Gruger, for your insightful presentation on these complex themes and how they intersect with the making of peace. I feel inspired to reflect on the ways I can contribute to creating spaces of peace and belonging in my life and in my relationships. Next up is Dr. Piri, who will take us on a narrative journey through homecoming and homemaking, providing a deeper understanding of these concepts and their significance in our lives and communities. Dr. Piri, you are welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, and happy Feast Day. Yes. I think a lot has been said already by Dr. Jacko and Professor Terry. It's quite interesting because when I was thinking about how to present this, I thought to myself, how do I put it? Then I thought that maybe it would be good if I give an example of myself. I hope it won't be narcissist, but there's nothing special about me, so it won't much, have an impact on that. But one thing that I was just thinking about it is to say, I was even thinking about the issue of home, like that they've said, and it's more like identity. And according to the course, because I looked at the course a little bit and I discovered that one of the most interesting thing was also the issue that when you are at home, you're always at peace. That means things are okay with yourself, with your surroundings. And also home can also be understood as a physical place, yes. Like you can identify in terms of maybe home as nationality, can also be a place where you feel at peace with, can also be what I call convenient abstract, whereby it's a place that I cannot touch. But when I'm in that particular space, let me use the word space, I feel that I'm at home. And I think I'm a very good example of trying to give an example of a person who have looked for a home. And it's very interesting also because when they were talking about the issue of home, one thing is now about is I started also thinking about what all the decisions that I've made in my life. I didn't know. I thought possibly as an academic, I chose a particular element of study, which is decolonization, about freedom, wanting to be free, trying to create an equitable society. I didn't realize that actually it was a way of making me realize that actually I don't have a home and I'm trying to fit somewhere else, or I'm trying to feel that I can be recognized. So I try to look for something else. So in most cases, some of the decisions that we make in our lives, we never realized that actually we are looking for a home. I'll give you an example. A good example is I was born in Zimbabwe and I grew up in Zimbabwe. That's a very good thing. That you can see how colonialism have actually mixed up things. When I was in Zimbabwe, when I was growing up, I speak, my tongue is heavily Shona because I grew up in the Shona area. But I never realized that I was Zimbabwean when I was young. I thought I was Malawian because I've got a Malawian origin. Because in Zimbabwe, whenever you're Malawian origin, they'll call you two names. One name was called Brandaya, the other one was called Nyasarand. Brandaya is from a town in Malawi called Blantyre, and Nyasarand means it's an old colonial name for Zimbabwe called no, not Blantyre, it's called Nyasaland, the old name for Malawi, colonial name for Malawi. These names are actually synonymous to Makwere, but not as malicious. You see, so when I was growing also, I was growing in an area that I was familiar with, the familiar language, familiar surroundings, but I knew from the way I was called that I didn't belong to that particular area. So in a way, when it comes to nationalist, I didn't know whether I was Zimbabwean or was Malawian. I only realized that I was Zimbabwean when I was actually older, because even the teachers will call you, oh, Branda, because you are growing up in areas like Johannesburg, the way you see Johannesburg, where like in Soweto, where you don't go to your raw area and stuff. You know how we define your home is when you can go to raw area. So since we go to Malawi, then I realized now later that actually I'm a Zimbabwean, but I don't feel Zimbabwean enough. But at the same time, I can't be Malawian because I don't even identify with people in Malawi. How they think, how they see the world is different from the way I see it, you see. So then I want to ask, one thing that is very interesting that I discovered is when I finished my matric, I went straight to the seminar. For all this time, I thought God have called me, but I discovered that actually possibly it was not about God. I was still looking for a space where it was neutral, where I can actually reestablish myself, a world where I cannot be defined. So the church, God, the concept of the seminar itself gives you a certain standing, and possibly even the titles that goes with it might actually give you a certain standing that you say, if I'm a father, because I'm called Father Stephen, that will change my identity crisis that I have. What makes it even worse is that even if I wanted to identify with the patriarchal movement of saying that as a Piri, actually the Piri is from my mother's side, so I couldn't even identify with my father because I didn't even know who my father was. Yeah, because I was born out of all wedlock. So you see, there was an identity crisis that started from a personal level. It goes on a national level. So it affected almost every part of my life. So when I was in Zimbabwe growing, I never felt that. Then I moved to the seminar where I thought that this was the second home that I'm going to have to recreate myself in a particular way. You know that whenever you join something for wrong reasons, it never works, no matter how much you try, even if you didn't do anything. Then that's when I left also the seminary, because I was asked to leave the seminary because they thought I couldn't fit within the seminary setup. But not because I've done something wrong or what, they just thought that possibly I'm not like that. Even if they even gave me a scholarship to go to the university, I was actually pushed out of the seminar to go to the university. That is when also I experienced another level of homelessness, because everything that I was creating for myself, where I felt I was stable, was also taken away from me. That's how I came to South Africa, because I was sent here to South Africa through the seminary. So I was at Sidara. That's where I was. So the issue of home was taken away again. And I was in a crisis because I remember saying to my superior that I didn't come here to study, to be at the university. I came here to be a priest, because that was something that made sense. So when I moved from there and I went into the university setup, it was a completely different setup altogether. So I needed also to look for another home. Okay, to look for another home. And the problem about homelessness is that you tend to reflect back. There was a time when I thought that I want to see where my grandfather came from when they moved because of colonial setup. So when I came here again, I discovered something that as a foreigner, so when you're in the seminar, you're more protected. People tend to respect you better. But once you are in the world, you become any other foreign national. And you know that our problems that we have here in South Africa, people always say maybe South Africans are xenophobic. I don't think that is very true. Okay, I'm not saying that they're not xenophobic, but they are. But not only South Africans are xenophobic. Because when I was called Kwere when I was here, I remembered also being called also Brandaya or Nyasarand in Zimbabwe, which they were also looking at me as a lesser human the way I was looked at when I came here. So when I was here, I didn't bother much because I thought I'm used to this. So, but at the end of the time, I started thinking to myself, why is it that we call ourselves with these names? Because once someone else calls you a name, no matter how you feel about yourself, these names they give you, like, they don't just say you are not from that particular nationality. No, they actually come down to define you as a human being. You feel like actually being a Zimbabwean is less human than being South African. People don't realize that. There's a certain human degradation. There's what is called an ontological violence that happens where who you are gets destroyed when someone else looks at you as if you are less than you're supposed to be. So that means when I went to the university, that time I think I just finished my philosophy. So I was starting for my honors. Then I did my first honors, my second masters, all this I was doing. But I discovered something that I only felt comfortable when I finished my second masters, when I started teaching, because I taught for 8 years. Then how did I find this home? I was not a permanent resident of South Africa, but for the first time, I was respected for what I can do. And my colleagues tend to see me on the basis of my capability as an academic or as a teacher at the university. That in itself made me even forget that actually I was foreign, because I still remember whenever I entered the university, I used to feel different. I used to feel more comfortable in the university than any other place that was out of it. It was because also the people that I met and people who were around me. So they created that idea of a home, and I felt comfortable. I felt it was not like a place like my office. No, it was more like the atmosphere, people around me, when they looked at me. And what is also very interesting is also my students never used to see me as an outsider. I used to tell them I'm Zimbabwean and stuff openly, but they used to actually respect me, so that I felt the university became a second home. Until a few years, I was replaced because there was this thing about South Africans now, which is reasonable because there are no jobs. So they needed also to put South Africans within the ranks. So I was replaced by young South Africans. So they took, because I was, as a lecturer, so I was replaced, but they wanted now to make everyone else permanent. So as a foreign national, I couldn't be full-time at the university. That's how I left KwaZulu-Natal after 8 years. So what happened was, it was more like also a psychological dom. It's more like a domicile where my home was taken away from me again, because everyone else respected me, my students and stuff. Even my students thought I was actually maybe a senior lecturer or something. Of course, I was going to be if I was South African, but I couldn't. I felt also that my home, it was domiciled in its way, that it was taken away from me. That's how I felt. That's how I moved after to Johannesburg, because I was frustrated. Because at this level and with my age, I'm supposed to be maybe a associate professor, But you start going around and moving around and trying to redefine yourself. Okay. So one thing that I want to express on this about finding a home is, I've been in South Africa for more than 18 years. Of course, I don't have a citizen of South Africa, not even a permanent resident. I never take it. I still renew almost every year. But there's something funny about it. There's no other place in my life that I call home like I do when I'm in South Africa. It's a country that I actually love, despite the way things are, despite the fact that I don't have, like, for example, you'd expect me to say I would prefer to be in Zimbabwe and be comfortable there. Because in Zimbabwe, no one asks me, all the police, about my permits and my papers and stuff. Here, everyone else will. And even when it comes to even getting a job, it's more difficult because I need always to maneuver. Like now, I had to do another postdoc as a postdoctoral student several times, because when you don't have a university, you cannot be a professor, because a professorship is given by a university, especially when it's associate professorship, and you're supposed to be attached to a university. As long as you're just flying around like I do, you can't. But one thing that is funny is this is my home, because my wife is South African. I live here. I don't have papers. I don't have all other constitutional rights that South Africans has. But I've come to love this country. I think this is what Professor Jack was calling what is called moral imagination. That's how I said, I asked myself, how will I be able to define home for myself? Even if I was to get a permanent job, if I was to get a citizenship, was it going to be home? That is when you realize that this is the last part that I call homecoming, where I thought I sit down and said, what is it that no one else can take away from me? I don't want to use my name. I don't want to use my origin or my descent, but what is it that I am that can be? So I end up defining myself on the basis of my academic life, or trying to understand what it means to be human. And coincidentally, whenever you seek an identity, a home all your life, you tend to find an academic place where you find some consolation. Someone who says something within academic, then sometimes you end up becoming sort of like a specialist in that particular profession, as if it's professional, but it's also relatively personal. Why? I tend to go on the decolonial side. I started thinking, because if I look back into my life, people who have helped me to be where I am today, and also Father Martin included, in my journey as an academic, many people do. And people who have helped me, they've never been only Black. They've never been only rich. They've never been only South Africans. They were different people from different places. So I discovered that I can never identify myself, or even go back to say maybe I'm a Malawian, or go back again to say I'm a Zimbabwean. Then I said, how do I define myself? So now I want to move into a little bit into theory to say actually how theory have also informed who I am. I was happy that Dr. Jaco and Professor Terry were talking about other theories. Me, I found consolation in Fritz Fanon. Fanon is the one who've given consolation how I found my home today. It's because when I am in this, one thing that I discovered is, despite all the turbulence and the name calling and stuff, there'll always be people within those localities that you actually identify, look at you and see you in your humanity. Sometimes we tend to look for the negative influences that come from other people. Like if you look in South Africa, for example, most people who are foreign nationals, actually what they do is now, before they even talk to South Africa, they've assumed that South Africa is thinking like that. Maybe that's the same thing that the South African is also thinking about that particular person. But I discovered that there's a lot of also good energy that comes out in different sectors, in all the places that I have been and I've been identified with. That's where I found a home, because home in this sense simply means that we cannot define our home on a physical place only, or we cannot define our home on the basis of where we come from or how we look like. We should always define our home on the basis of our own humanity. Like what Fanon says, Fanon makes us, gives this idea that Dr. Jago and Dr. Kerr were talking about, but you call it what's called a universal humanism, where we should also realize that when I see Professor Terry, I don't see a white person first. I first see another human being who happens to be white. When I see Professor Terry, I don't see a woman. What I will see in Professor Terry is a human being who happens to be a woman. So that being a woman does not define our humanness, and being Black or being white or being poor or rich does not define our humanness. What the church calls the common good. So when I started looking at that, actually how we make home is not only us being accepted in a place, it's also us coming in that place with a certain attitude that allows us to accept us, to be accepted. That's when I realized that actually I've created a lot of networks within South Africa. I have been acknowledged a lot in South Africa. There's no other place in the world, as far as I'm concerned, that will really appreciate me the way I am, the way I've been appreciated by my friends. And my friends are beyond South Africa. Of course, majority are South Africans because I'm here, but most of them are out there. So when it talks about the issues of homemaking and being at home, I think we also need to open ourselves to a certain level in which also we allow that peace to be. Once we do that, even those who look at us, they will realize that actually we are worth it. Because sometimes charity begins at home. How we create our home is also how I see myself and how I define myself. If I was to go around the world, wherever I would have gone, I was going to be looking for a home, without realizing that sometimes where I am is where the home is. I think I want to stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Piri. Thank you for sharing your personal journey of home and homecoming with us. Really, your heartfelt story resonated deeply. And I want to thank you in a special way. You reminded us of the profound connection between place, identity, belonging, but more in a special way, our connection as humanity. We are truly grateful for your openness and generosity in sharing your experience. My thoughts went to the children who were born here in South Africa, speaking the languages and learning the worldviews of South Africa, who have never been to their home country of their parents and yet cannot call SA their home. And I meet those children in schools all the time. Finally, we have Ms. Fraser, a student at St Augustine's College, who will share insights into a current research project under the college's research program. Leona, you are welcome.
Thank you, Leduma. Good evening, everyone. To Prof. Seko and to my supervisor, Prof. Kruger, and to the rest of the team at St. Augustine College. Thank you for this opportunity. And I also just like to greet my classmates as well. Kirsty, if you are ready to share my presentation. Thank you. So the title of my proposed research is Domicide and Homecoming, the lived experiences of people who were forcefully relocated in apartheid Cape Town. The aims of this mini dissertation is to better understand the lived experiences of people who had to make homes for themselves again in a new environment after being forcefully removed. It's to determine what the concept of home means to people who were forcefully removed, to gain insight as to how they experienced the loss of a home, and to understand how they tried to come home and to make home in their new environment. So the research also aims to answer the following questions. What are the lived experiences of people having to make a home for themselves again after being forcefully relocated? What is the meaning of home for people who were forcefully removed? How did they experience the loss of home, and how do they try to come home and to make home for themselves in their new environment? Just the background and the context of the research and the rationale. As most of you might know, that land and where people reside has long been a very sensitive and painful issue in the history of South Africa. During the apartheid rule, many people were forcefully evicted from their homes and had their homes demolished. And after being relocated, many had to make new homes for themselves, as we've seen during the enforcement of the Group Areas Act of 1950. That act has since been repealed, and other legislation such as the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from the Unlawful Occupation of Land Act of 1998, commonly known as the PI Act, was enacted. Now, Section 4, Subsection 6 and Subsection 7 of the PI Act states that a court may only grant an eviction order if it's just and equitable to do so, after having considered all relevant factors. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa also speaks to this in section 26, subsection 3, where it firmly establishes that no one may be evicted from their home or have their home demolished without an order of court made after considering all relevant circumstances. Now, it is the lived experiences of people who were forcefully removed, had their homes demolished, and had to start making a home and hopefully coming home that is the focus of this research. Regarding the reflexivity and positioning, the concept of domicide, homemaking, and homecoming have so many connotations, and perception of it can be vast. But it's the concept of domicide, the deliberate destruction of a home by human agency in the pursuit of a specified goal, and which causes suffering to its victims, that most caught my attention. I never knew that it was even a thing. Portia St. Smith makes a distinction between extreme domicide and everyday domicide. Now, everyday domicide apparently happens worldwide and occurs every day to people, mostly because of political and economic operations, and it affects everyone except those who directly benefits from it, normally the rich. Apartheid was an extreme form of domicide. Extreme domicide consists of major planned operations that occur rather sporadically in time, but often affect large areas and change the lives of considerable number of people. My family were victims of domicide under the apartheid regime, when in 1985 we were forcibly removed from our home and relocated somewhere else. My mother, a single parent, and my father had died in a train accident, had to cope with raising a young family of 6 on her own and to make a new home for our family. There were a few artifacts from the old house, which we incorporated in the new house. And an item as small as a stone we used to scrub our bodies with had become such an important symbol from the old house into the new house, which came to represent really who we were as a family when my father was still alive. We have it up to this day. These artifacts and symbols my family claimed as their own. It is the scope and the context of my life which shape my identity and sense of belonging, to which I commonly refer to as home. Home, according to Jacobson, is a place of refuge, of self-enclosure, and of familiarity, where we can close off the outside world for a while. It is these lived experiences and observations that brought about an interest to explore the lived experiences of people forcefully relocated. Just briefly, the literature review. House, according to the Oxford School Dictionary, refers to a building where people live. That opposed to the definition of home by Jacobson, which is a place of and for the self and a refuge of some sort. Jacobson states that the experience of home is intimate and private, where we live, whether we live alone or in community. And to illustrate this, she uses the example of a door. We close the door behind us when we enter our homes to enclose ourselves. On the same door we use to invite others to enter. The experience of home brings about a sense of freedom and security. It's a space where we have the privilege to daydreaming, to wander without interruption or any care that it has closing hours or a curfew. The concept of home in the legal sector remains to some degree an open concept of a no numerus clausa, if you will, depending on which argument you wish to advance. It has both positive and negative aspects to it. For some feminist theorists, the concept may hold out to be a place of terror, where domestic violence proves the order of the day. But for some, it is their point of reference, where they are most secure, safe, and where they find a sense of identity. According to Fox, the phenomenon of home is an intangible relationship between people and the places in which they dwell. It is not visible nor accurately measurable. Domicide, the Group Areas Act of 1950 affected mostly the poor and the propertyless, and it caused a divide not only among different race groups, but also among class. Owners who lived on their properties were afforded a longer period to vacate, as opposed to tenants, those were mostly considered to be poor, who were given notice to vacate by a certain date. The aim of the Group Areas Act was a strategy by the then government to control relations between races and to promote the notion of an endogenous growth of a specific race. In a pursuit to achieve its goal, people of color were forcefully removed from their homes. They were far removed from their places of employment. The devastating effects of this act was that the poor were displaced from the inner city to the outskirts in towns hardly equipped to afford the cost, the time, and the emotional trauma. Domicide contains the notion of suffering, and what makes it devastating is that for some, homes are seen as an extension of themselves. The concept of domicide will be discussed in the context of the repealed legislation of the Group Areas Act and the current legislation, that's the PI Act, to gain a better understanding of the concept of domicide in relation to these legislations. With regard to homecoming and homemaking, so when it comes to homecoming and homemaking, it's important to keep perspective that home is not something that is given to us, but that it is generated developmentally. It requires the discipline of being active. Lederach's moral imagination, wherein discussed the four disciplines to transcend violence, will be discussed in a pursuit to understand the concept of home. Just briefly, the research design and methods, the qualitative descriptive research design is best suited for this mini dissertation as it ties in with the aim of the research, which is to explore and describe the lived experiences of the participants and to afford them to tell their life story and share their experiences of what home is and means to them. In this way, the results are then analyzed and interpreted to showcase the unique experiences of each participant and to determine, in conclusion, if the outcome of the study confirms current theories on the notion of domicide and homecoming. Just the last aspect that I will touch on tonight, further than this method, the research design, allows me also to retain my own experiences and understandings of the topic, but not to use it to overpower the research and for it to become a thesis of solipsism, but to add to the richness of the research in the sense that it interrogates my own pre-understanding and prejudices. Moreover, concepts such as bracketing will also afford me the opportunity to be aware of my own biases and to take a step back and allow the people who participate in the study to relate their lived experiences and then to see this phenomenon unfolding. I think I'm going to end it here. So if there's then any questions, then I will address that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leona. Thank you so much for your compelling presentation on this research surrounding land and the forceful removal of people. I really think this is an incredible and important and sensitive topic, and your work is crucial in bringing these issues to light. I deeply appreciated the sharing of your story and trauma. We wish you the very best of luck as you continue this important work and look forward to seeing the impact it will undoubtedly make. One and all, as we approach the conclusion of our program, we will open the floor for question and answer session. where you can we can have the opportunity to engage directly with our speakers. Your questions and reflections are not only welcome, but they are an integral part of this evening's dialogue. We ask you to please put your camera on and your mic on when you are asking questions. And please ensure your camera is positioned appropriately. Be mindful of your background and dress as you would in an in-person meeting. Please use the raise hand feature when you ask or when you wish to speak, and wait for us to acknowledge you before you unmute. And when speaking, be mindful of time, as we have multiple speakers. Where possible, please do address them by their name: Professor Kruger, Professor Sako, Dr. Piri, and Leona, Ms. Fraser. I shall take 3 questions at a time, and remember to lower your hand as soon as you are done asking your question. The floor is yours. You may ask any questions that you have. I see a hand, Jan. Please go ahead.
Just in a few words where I come from. I'm coming from Europe, from a small country called Belgium. I came to South Africa in the 1980. Now, my experience, what I've seen myself, when because I came as a missionary, as a priest, and now I'm the bishop, a bishop in a diocese in South Africa. When I came in 1980, I was sent to that time a homeland, Kwakwa, homeland for the Basotho. What I saw, how people were dumped, coming from mostly from the farms, and they were not needed anymore in the farms, and the only place where they could go was that homeland. I saw people standing next to their furniture, which was offloaded of a lorry, just on a piece of bare land. At times there would be a hill completely empty, and the next day it was full of people dumped there. Now, that's, I think, an experience of domicide. But how did we respond as pastors to that situation? First of all, meeting those people and starting a conversation with them, praying with them. Also, we try to encourage members of the local church community to reach out to those people and make them to feel welcome, inviting them to join the Christian community. Positively, I discovered the resilience of those people. In no time, they had built something, even it was only making use of some wood planks and some plastic sheet. Now my question, what could be our response as church today, looking at new forms of domicile in view of creating a space where people could feel at home? Thank you. Perhaps my question is more addressed to Professor Giaco, I think. Yes.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you so much. And the question, There's no other question at the moment. Professor Yako and anybody else who would like to chip in, please do so.
Thank you, Bishop de Groef, and also for sharing that. I'm just under the impression again of the concreteness. You know, this notion of home is such a concrete notion. It's not abstract in the first place. It really speaks to people's experiences, and I think therefore there's such a lot that one can do with this notion of hope. But your question, of course, is uh, I think more rhetorical, because that exactly is what I think, theologically speaking, and as people, religious people, members of the church, we must consider that how can the church really be welcoming more, be making this home, um, sharing a common homemaking for people, and then taking people perhaps on a journey. The church is also a journeying reality, in a way to on the way to the home, our who is God, I suppose, to say it in that way. And how can what kind of theology and view of the church, ecclesiology, can facilitate that? I think that's part of what the theological aspect of our research program must be about. But if you have certain considerations or ideas, I'd be very happy if you to share that them with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Yako. I don't know if there's anybody else who would like to comment on this.
Yes, I really appreciate Bishop Jan's reflection and question. And I see that Dr. Philip Wanika wants to say something. So go ahead, Dr. Wanika.
Thank you so much, Professor Terry. I think I can still give you the floor since you've started, Prof.
Okay, thank you so much. I think what's really important for us in the space is to enter into it with an unknown knowing that what we're doing all the time is living and being in liminal spaces where we don't know. The world is at sea in all sorts of ways. The minute we talk about being home with someone, as Dr. Piri said, it's snatched. And where do we find that home, and how do we build that home, and with whom do we build that home? And I think that for those of us that are coming from a religious perspective, we're blessed because we find home with each other. We find home when we have authentic relationships where we seek the truth, where we see each other's truth, where we engage in a deep way with each other and not stay at a cognitive place and not stay at a how this is the problem, how do we solve it? We live in a space that's liminal, that's uncomfortable. We try finding each other, we lose each other, we find each other again. And I honestly think that there are no easy answers to this because we are re-encountering, reimagining, re-relating all the time. And it's that Christ's love that actually spurs us on and keeps us bonded and keeps us together.
Philip, thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Leduma and colleagues. And in fact, Professor Sako has actually echoed exactly what I was thinking about. And it's funny, I was thinking of the cognitive element of peacemakers. When I listened to Dr. Piri, when I listened to Leona, Professor Yaku, Professor Yan, this open-spaced kind of a question of what makes a transformative peacemaker, questions of the cognitive power of peacemakers towards actually understanding the spaces of homemakers and homecomers. I hear Dr. Piri, some of our experiences also as mediators. You question which is this deconstructed way of looking at peacemaking, if I could extend the idea of homemaking and homecoming. So I think the idea of deconstructing some of these concepts, while at the same time not losing this experience that was beautifully put by Jan, that you find resilience in societies. And perhaps what we need to do is look back again spiritually and have that cognitive we tone down and try and look at how we can transcend some of these aspects. So this is something, it's not an answer, but it's something that I see as a philosophical question as we think about understanding homemakers and also homecomers. How do we facilitate that space? How do we mature as peacemakers to be cognitive enough to understand the different spaces, whether you are coming back home or making home? So again, it's a philosophical aspect out there. So thank you, Leduma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Philip. If there is any more questions, and I would really love to thank Bishop for sharing his story, and call on everybody who would like to share their story. We still have some time, a few more minutes. If there are no questions, please share your stories with us. Bishop, if you are there, please let us know if your question has been answered, or if you have any further comments. Professor Yako?
Thanks. I just wanted to say something about the other students that's also part of this meeting this evening. But I see Mr. John Legordi also raised his hand. So why don't you go ahead first, and then, if necessary, I can say something further. Mr. John Legordi, I'm not sure if you are speaking, but your microphone was still muted, so there it's off now.
Good evening, Professor Jaco. Hello.
Good evening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm battling with this notion of homemaking and homecoming, especially in a context of South Africa. In a context of South Africa, where we see and we also witnessed that it is a country with a painful past, a country of painful past, and as the church who, as the agent of unifying people and unifying humanity itself, how do we become relevant, especially in our epoch, where we have seen that even on social media, the society can be hostile. On social media itself, if we can even sense xenophobic attacks. The society which is hostile, greed, and will always refer you to the past. And as the church, we are always associated with those who took the land. We cannot have that strong voice. So this bringing people home or homecoming, how do we become effective while we've got this identity of being part of the colonial mindset? So I would like us to be helped in that regards, because in so many platforms where we are engaged intellectually, the church philosophically, when it comes on, it will always be seen as this other monster which came with a European jacket, but at the same time trying to appease the local people, while it's actually depriving them of their, inverted commas, their home. So I would like to have professors to reply to that.
You are still muted.
Thank you so much. Can we also ask Dr. Piri to come in here? I see your hand.
Actually, I wanted to respond to what John have expressed, because funny enough, I've lived enough in South Africa to understand the situation. I've argued a lot. Actually, there's a paper that I wrote on violence and xenophobic violence in South Africa, and that paper became very controversial because I wanted to show the other side, because they thought that is a foreign, because once you look your appeal, they think is going to support the other side. So I was like a little bit different. So the paper, the first title of that paper was saying South Africa is not xenophobic, in a way that I wanted to show the other side of xenophobia in general. You should know something. One thing that I explained within that particular chapter was to show that South Africa experienced what you call the double colonialism. They experienced what is called colonialism, the normal one that we did under the British. But after 1994, there was another one again. That was in 1948 by the Dutch, by the descendants of Dutch, Afrikaners. But the difference between the two is that the second colonialism, we were being colonized by someone who was already bitter, who was being colonized themselves. So that means if you look at it, the Dutch were oppressed by the British. Then when they were free, but they were not really free, they wanted also to regain their own identity. So they were like more threatened. So that means the black majority or the other colors, apart from the dark, they experienced a lot. So if you look at South Africa, in South Africa, there's no problem of xenophobia. There's a problem of violence, and that violence has been passed on through generation. And South Africa also occupies a unique place where there's a deep psychological violence that has been there, which other countries. So I'll give you an example. A person like me who comes from Zimbabwe, come to stay in South Africa, I quickly judge South Africans for what I see without understanding their context and their existential circumstances that are very difficult than I come from. I assume that they should have the same psyche in dealing with them. So when I was talking about finding my new home in South Africa, my argument was to say, I discovered that actually Black South Africans that we think are being xenophobic to us, they are actually exhibiting a perspective of subjugation and pain that they have. Not necessarily that they hate other Black people, but if you look at the issues, it's because where we are coming from. So what I was thinking that if you want to create a home in South Africa, you're coming from outside. Because I will give you one example that I normally used to give is this. When you are in South Africa, actually, South Africans among themselves, they tend to have divisions that are more, they're so deep than you find the ones that they have against foreigners in a way, those ones who are coming from outside. Then you realize that it's not about South Africans per se, as Black people hating Black people or something like that. It's also about them also trying to get over these divisions that have been put within their lives, that have actually, made them feel that they cannot move. So when we are coming in this space of South Africa, like me, I'm married to a South African. My wife is South African. I tend to understand, to realize that actually, before I start judging them when they make a certain reaction, I should first find out where is that coming from. And one thing that I discovered in South Africa when I was writing that article was to say that once you come with that perspective of understanding, actually, you end up becoming in more harmony with South Africans. I've never found the South Africans is rude and radical the way people normally say. They are not. I spent most of my life in KwaZulu-Natal, where I found that there was both I could understand it, I knew where it was coming from. These are good people that are also victims, just like any other. So the problem that we have is we have got a bigger problem than this xenophobic or dudula and what. It's much bigger than that. It's a psychological shock. It's a psychological violence that we're living in. So South Africans are in that particular space. So when we don't understand that, that's when we start now thinking that South Africans are xenophobic. Actually, the problem in South Africa is not xenophobia. It's more violence. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Phiri. John, I don't know if you were raising a hand again. No. Oh.
Dr. Phiri, Dr. Phiri, yeah, he is profound. He is very profound. He's but I wanted him to at least to also go deeper, like the mission of the church in such a psychologically violent society, where how can the church becomes a tool of calming the situation, of bringing humanity together. Because I don't think the Catholic bishop of Nigeria, for example, it can be happy that the South African Catholic bishops were quiet when a young lady who applied to be a Miss South Africa was attacked that way, and the church maintained silence. I don't think the two conferences will agree that a human being with the image of God is attacked, and this side we are quiet, and the conference that side is aware of that a human being was dehumanized and psychologically attacked. I wanted to know, how can the church come in effectively and challenge such issues to the point that it can be heard without being labeled as part of the colonizers. That's what I wanted to professor to touch.
Thank you. May I try to quickly respond, or Leduma, please?
Please go. I was going to caution us from bringing the media stories in so early. If we could make them as general as possible in our response. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Jaco.
Thank you for that. Yes, but I do think it's a very important question, and what I do take away from that input is that, you know, as St Augustine College, and now we've tried to take this as a research program, we must be very careful not to try and give easy answers. I think that will be a mistake. If our research is too shallow or giving easy answers, we must definitely acknowledge the fact that we are battling with this, as you said, this notion of home and what would it mean, and specifically also for the church to really try and deny the conflict is definitely not the way to go. I think, if I may, you know, I don't want to give theological answers. I don't think it's my place, but I want to say, in terms of the research program, the notion of the moral imagination is important, and I think theology and the church has such a lot of resources for the moral imagination, even in the language of scripture of Revelation, to talk of a home to come. The future is still open for a home to come, and we must now, in trying to apply the theology of the gospel, the good news of Christ to embrace everyone, in trying to apply that to South Africa and our society. What are the stories that we're going to tell? I think the story of, say, for instance, the Rainbow Nation that was there, it was told a bit after 1994, and then people became quite disillusioned about the Rainbow Nation narrative or story, specifically as it was proposed by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. But what are the new stories that we can tell together about our country? That will be stories of inclusivity, of homecoming to really own, in a symbolic sense, our space here where we are, and really be homemakers for our compatriots and for everyone here. I think that's the question, and I think Christian theology has a lot of resources, of course, to bring into that moral imagination and the telling of stories. But I don't want to give the answers to that now.
Thank you so much, Prof. Dr. Phiri.
I hope I'm not talking too much. Okay. Me, I don't go to a Zimbabwean mass in South Africa. This is some of the things that also I found also on the church side. I don't go to a Zimbabwean mass in South Africa. I know, you see, that's one thing that I wanted to, we always have got this idea that I discovered that actually the church creates these things by allowing. You can find that I don't mind people having masses in their own languages when they are, wherever they are. But they've always been these issues of us as the church. Because remember, what is my argument that I find out when I was here in South Africa is because, you see, I don't think there's a problem of having diversity, being Zulu, Xhosa, different colors, white and what. I think it makes the world beautiful. But one thing that is a problem, which I was trying to explain from Fanonian perspective, is to say, before I see a Zulu, I should first see a human being who happens to be Zulu or Shona or what. And one of the things that I've argued when it comes to issues of xenophobia has always been this issue that I think South African politicians are xenophobic, but not South African people. And what they do is they manipulate issues and take advantage of people's plight to make things worse. Because I was even trying to do this study with Operation Dudula. Yeah, I was trying to understand. They're actually reasonable people. They are not like as wild and evil as we were told. So what I think the church can play as a role myself is not really to explain specific issues, but also to be able also to counteract what politicians are saying, because people will listen to the church. Because if you look at the issues of our differences, if you look at our Catholic social teachings, they are very universal and they actually help us to live together. But if you look at the way politicians, especially when they were campaigning, the way they speak, so what they do is that they also influence the way general South Africans who are innocent think. That's why we find that the issue of home, some of us, we find it very difficult. Like, for example, if you go and renew a permit just before elections, you are more likely to be rejected several times than when it's other times. So what we are trying to do is now for us also to be able, for the church also to help in creating that home. Whenever politicians makes these explicit, divisive statements, I think the church should just comment in general as the church, I think. But sometimes you find that quiet, which John was saying, actually I feel it, because the church comes with a voice that tries to see. The idea is not to take a side, because, like, for example, I'll give you even the example of Chidima, for example. That thing was not about xenophobia. To be honest with you, if the parents stole someone else's identity, I don't, as a foreigner myself, I would not want that to happen even in my own country. I don't think that was xenophobic. People took it out of context sometimes, why there was this reaction. But at the same time, was Chidima himself wrong as a girl? She speaks like a Sowetian. She does not speak like Nigerian. So everything about herself is, as long as Chidima didn't know that what happened when she was young, then she was. So there should be clear, even the idea of Home Affairs making a like investigation. I think it's the right thing to do, because someone suffered for many years, maybe 23 years without an identity. So what I'm trying to say is, now, if us as the church, we come, especially the church explains the difference, that by investigating, Home Affairs is not being xenophobic. They're just doing something that even Nigeria would have done it if it was a South African who have done that. So we have come to a point whereby how we create our home, how we destroy it, it's so easy by just name calling. You see, so I think the church should also be able also to talk against, not against, but trying to correct some of the misinformation that divides people instead of uniting them. Okay, thank you. Stop.
Thank you so much, Dr. Piri. We are coming very close to the end of our program. If I may ask Dr. Piri my own question, and everybody who would like to chip in. I grew up witnessing the violence from across the river. And I think I can identify when violence happens to me and people around me. But I was also distant in some way, because I could only watch from across the river. And so I don't have the experience of the trauma. I have never been silenced, so I can be very vocal. I can also speak without fear. But sometimes I'm caught in between agency and being reactive, or what is the word? Radical. So now I'm wondering, as we are navigating the homemaking, so what would be the right position, or the hard position in engaging in homemaking from someone like me, who doesn't really have the pain, but is passionate about this work?
I'll just try to be quick the way I think. I've worked with, I think coming to South Africa was a good thing for me, actually, because I think if you don't know something about a person, before you judge them, listen to what they are saying. Just everyone else have got a story that they are to tell. If you listen to that story and where it comes from, you connect. Sometimes what we do, we assume we have got answers. What got a priori, we think that, like what Prof. Jack was saying about the issue of experiences. I've got a feeling that sometimes when foreigners come, like from Zimbabwe, they're coming here. I'll give you an example of Zimbabwe. I'm from Zimbabwe. They think that they've got more problems than South Africans have. But they don't know, maybe South Africans have got much more problem than you have yourself. The problem is we have failed to listen to people. Not to judge them, just to listen to that story and what it means, and try to be in their fit. What we were taught, like in counseling in most cases, that's how you can engage with anything. How I've lived in KwaZulu-Natal, people used to say in KwaZulu-Natal, people are very rude. Because the Zulus are like this. I never saw that when I went there. I just thought these are people who are proud of their culture. That's what I saw myself. Because I listened to them, and when they say things, where are they coming from? trying to imagine what it means to be in their circumstances. Then you start understanding. And when people realize that, you can see that, they tend also to want to know also your own perspective, to want to understand you. But the question, that the problem that we have now is whoever comes, like from Nigeria, from what, like even now, if you see the issue of Nigeria, they're even taking that little girl who knows nothing to say, come in and perform in Nigerian pigeon for this beauty. That kid belongs to South Africa. It's not a Nigerian problem. So people use their battles. They always finding a fault of blaming other people. But sometimes listening to people's stories itself will give you a lot about how to deal. And even the issue of creating a home. For me, I didn't come here so that I could create my own space. I came to coexist with other people with different experiences. When I started listening to their stories and they tell me their stories, you know, when you share deep stories, you get connected and become one. That's how I created the home. So when it comes to creation of home, it's an agent on both sides. Where if you cannot just say, I'm going to establish a home without you also opening up to those different experiences that will also affect. So that at the end of the day, a home is not something that you decide. It's something that's why you find that there's a name called homecoming. There's homemaking. How do we make that home? That's how I made my home in South Africa. I found this place is the only place that I would want to die. I don't even have a permanent residence or citizen. But because of that, this is my home. So it's easy to do that. That's how I've always been doing it. How I've lived in South Africa and try to see how I can be part of the home here. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Professor Yako, Professor Terry, Leona, and you, Dr. Piri. I don't know if you have any last comments before we close.
Yes.
Nothing from my side. Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thanks to you also for chairing the Duma.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for being here and for your patience and for your deep engagement and your listening and hearing what we are venturing forth with. And thank you to our wonderful students who make our lives worthwhile and give our lives meaning. And it is a wonderful journey that we are making together to build a good home for all for whoever we encounter. And it's a great privilege working with everybody and living in this community. So God bless and thank you.
I think I've said more than enough.
Also nothing from my side. Thank you, Leduma.
Thank you so much. If there are no more comments from anybody, the audience, the students and friends of St. Augustine's, we have come to the end of our evening program. Once again, thank you for your presence, your participation in this important event. Please, if you are interested in knowing more about the college, please visit www.staugustine.ac.za. Happy feast to everyone and wishing you a blessed evening further.